How's it going, everybody? This is Anthony Miranda. A lot of you guys know me as the Armed Scholar, and this is going to be the first episode of the Armed Scholar podcast. This is something that quite a few of you guys have been asking me to do for quite a while. And so now here it is. For those of you who don't want to watch those super quick videos I put out, this is going to be a little bit longer form, a little bit more informal, and just so I can have more of a discussion with a lot of you guys. So for the first episode that I thought I would bring you guys, it would just be more of a kind of walkthrough of my background, how I got into firearms, how I got into the whole 2A world, 2A advocacy, and pretty much how I ended up doing the YouTube channel and how I ended up where I am now to where I have the YouTube channel. I work with Firearms Policy Coalition as a Second Amendment attorney, and how I'm just pretty much very much ingrained in the Second Amendment advocacy world. So without further ado, I'm just going to kind of walk you guys through my life, my upbringing, and how I ended up being where I am now. So I think one of the interesting things and how I'm a little bit different from a lot of the other people in the Second Amendment realm is that I did not grow up with the traditional kind of upbringing with firearms in the house. My dad was not super heavy into firearms. He was a correctional officer in the state of California, had firearms, had to qualify and do all of that because of his job, but it wasn't something that we would always go out and shoot guns and go to the range or go hunting or anything like that. So firearms were in the house, but the whole firearms community, shooting, Second Amendment advocacy, all that was not really ingrained in me at a younger age. It wasn't until pretty much college that I really got heavily into firearms, the Second Amendment world, and the whole gun community on YouTube and all of that. So that's kind of like my early childhood. Didn't really have heavy influence of firearms, would go out and shoot every great once in a while, little 22 rifles, stuff like that. But, wasn't really heavily into firearms. And so I think that's a lot different from some other people and a lot of people who are very much heavily into firearms. But I think that kind of gives me a unique perspective because, I was not ingrained with firearms in the house. I wasn't taught early on, the importance of self-defense and the Second Amendment. It was something I had to stumble on later on in life. So beyond that, that really just takes me into the next kind of major section of my life. Like I said, early childhood, had firearms, would go shoot every once in a while. My dad had firearms, would go shoot every once in a while, but it wasn't something that was heavily in our house. Like I said, it really wasn't until I went to undergrad and I went to the University of California, Santa Barbara for undergrad, and I studied history there. Got my bachelor's in history, and the reason why I did history, people ask me all the time, why did you pick history? I did like history. I was really good at history, of course, especially now it pays off with what I do a lot and what I talk about a lot. But the main goal always was to go to law school. So when I would talk to counselors and say, hey, I want to go to law school, I don't just want to go to a 4-year and just get a bachelor's degree. The plan was to always go to law school. They told me you had a few options. You could take, courses for history, you could major in political science, or you could major in some other things like English. They also recommended philosophy, but for me, I just thought philosophy was a complete just waste of time. It does have really good translation over to if you go to law school because a lot of the logic stuff and primarily a lot of the logic stuff actually helps you with the LSATs. But for me, it just was like if everything went absolutely wrong, the last thing I wanted to do was walk away from undergrad with a bachelor's in philosophy because you can just do absolutely nothing with that. So my thought was at least with a history degree, maybe I could be a history teacher. But again, the goal was always to go to law school. And another thing actually interesting to note that a lot of people don't know is I was the first one in my family to ever go to college. My dad went to a junior college for like all of 2 weeks to play baseball and then quit. But as far as like actually graduating from a college and getting a degree, I was the first one. Then my sister did it after me. My older sister did it after me. She got a nursing degree. But I was the first one and definitely was the first one to go beyond and to get a law degree. So went to University of California, Santa Barbara. If you don't know anything about UC Santa Barbara, yes, it is a very big party school. I didn't know that at the time. I was a little bit naive. What I ended up doing is I applied to a bunch of schools in the state of California, got into a few, and really I picked Santa Barbara because they offered me the best scholarship package. And so I was very much cognizant of how much, undergrad and going to college was going to cost, because I was footing the bill myself. So I didn't want to take on a ton of debt. So they offered me a really good scholarship to where I walked out of undergrad pretty much with no debt. And so that's why I picked Santa Barbara. But I'm very happy with my choice, because UC Santa Barbara is an absolutely beautiful campus, amazing school, amazing education, and I got it pretty much for free. So do not regret that decision at all. If anything, it's some of the best times of my life. But along with that, and the why Santa Barbara and me going to UC Santa Barbara is relevant, is because I went during the years when there was a lot going on in Santa Barbara. There were some riots that happened because UC Santa Barbara is a heavy party school. And so there were some incidents where there were some riots because people just got way too drunk and started to riot during Deltopia. So that happened during my senior year. And also the major thing that's very relevant to why I am the way that I am and why I'm a Second Amendment advocate and kind of got introduced to the gun world was because during my senior year, there was also a mass shooting, or I know a lot of people don't like that term, but there was a shooting at the school. And it was an individual who went to Santa Barbara. Actually, he didn't even go to Santa Barbara. He went to one of the junior colleges that was close by. But he was just a psycho. Had a lot of mental health issues, clearly. There are some videos that you can find out there of he has the reason why he went around to shoot people. Just a complete psychopath. And if you guys want to look further into that, you can definitely do that. But I just don't want to give that individual any more attention than he deserves. But there was a shooting that happened my senior year. And it was a very high profile shooting. And because of that shooting, there was a lot of discussion that started to pop up in the state of California. Some legislation was passed because of that shooting in the state of California. And also there was just general discussion amongst my friends and the community in Santa Barbara about firearms, gun control, gun laws in the state of California, and various things like we need to restrict access to firearms. And like I said, at this time, I was not big into firearms. I didn't have a huge upbringing in firearms. And I think one thing that's different from me is I am a lifetime learner, and I'm very curious about a lot of things, and I really like to learn things. So when the whole discussion popped up about gun control and we need to do more in the state of California, I'm a little bit different because I don't like to speak on things I haven't even educated myself on. So out of that, what I decided to do is to educate myself. I didn't think it was right for me to have a big opinion on gun control in California when I didn't even understand what laws were on the books in the state of California. And again, one of the things is I was always intending to go to law school, so I was already curious about a lot of those things, about laws and legislation and politics and all that. So I decided to educate myself. And I remember during this time was when I got heavily into YouTube, because one of the avenues that I tried to educate myself through was watching YouTube and watching YouTube videos about California gun laws or just guns in general, because I had no basis to understand what firearms were legal. Didn't really understand what an AR-15 was or what various handguns were that were being discussed. So I just decided to educate myself. And this is kind of the first time that I really got into the firearms community, the gun community on YouTube, and really got into YouTube in the first place, because this is around 2013, 2014, I believe. So YouTube definitely wasn't as big as it is now. It was big, and a lot of people watched YouTube, and I watched YouTube, but this was kind of I would say the area of time when YouTube really started to get big, and you started to have really big names in the YouTube community and who became famous. And not so much in the gun world. I mean, there are guys who've been around, on YouTube since its inception. But again, this is the time I really got into YouTube, and I really got into watching those gun guys on YouTube. And like a lot of you guys, I'm sure the first couple people I was introduced to were people like Hickok 45 and Iraq Veteran 8888. And that's when Barry was still on the channel before he passed away. And I watched things like Gun Gripes. And I really think it was actually probably an Iraq Veteran video that I first got into the gun community through, because they would do those Gun Gripes. And I think there was a video on like California gun laws, and they were doing a gun gripes on it. And I think that's the first video that like popped up when I looked up California gun laws. I think that's correct. I think it was around that time. So those guys are the ones who first got me into firearms in the gun community. And from there, I would watch people like Nut and Fancy. He does those feature length videos. I still watch Nut and Fancy every once in a while. I still watch people like Iraq Veteran, Hickok. And then from there, it just took off, started to pretty much watch anybody and everybody. And I think actually that's a little bit where I'm different from other people too, is I was a very big fan of the gun YouTube community before I ever even got involved in it. I would watch a lot of guys that I've got to meet now religiously. And it's kind of weird because I went from the position that probably a lot of you guys are, where you guys are fans of me. You're fans of other guys on the gun, YouTube, the gun tubers. You guys enjoy watching, and I'm still the same way. I still enjoy watching a lot of these guys' content. I'm still a huge fan of people like Garantham. I watch people like Jared from Guns and Gadgets, even though he does stuff similar to me. I still even watch his content because I watched it before. People like Jonathan from Tactical Toolbox, I watch his stuff. My favorite, and a lot of people have mixed feelings about this individual because they say he shifted a little bit away, but I still watch Talon Sai religiously. He's probably one of my favorite guys. I just like his perspective on life. I think he does some really interesting things that's a little bit different from just purely gun content. I mean, you can tell that he's really enjoying what he's doing and doing the whole van life stuff, and that just intrigues me. But yeah, I watch a lot of guys. If you guys could think of a name in the gun world, I probably watch them. There's some guys I don't watch religiously, but I still do watch them. So yeah, that was the time period, 2014, the Isla Vista shootings. That's when I first really got into firearms, the gun community, and educating myself about that. And like a lot of you guys know, once you get into firearms, the, gun community, learning about firearms, geeking out about them, it's pretty much over. It's like you catch this bug and it only escalates from there. So really, I've been on a unique path, and it's been a very fast exponential growth path because, a lot of you guys have been into firearms your whole life, but really I got into firearms heavily in 2013, 2014. So it's only been about, 7 years since I've really been educating myself heavily about various guns and laws and all of that. So, the Isla Vista shootings, that was the inception. I even have a video talking about a lot of that. I don't want to talk too much about the incident and what that all involved. I think one thing it's important for me to note, it's in no way was I directly affected by that mass shooting. I wasn't, in the line of fire of that individual. He did kill multiple people. He killed his roommates. He stabbed them to death. He shot a few people, and then he also ran over a bunch of people in his car as well. So he did injure and kill quite a few people, and it was a very big deal. And there's still a lot of, every year there's an anniversary of those Isla Vista shootings where people go and surf and put like flowers and lights out into the ocean right there on Santa Barbara because the campus is right on the ocean. So it's still a very big deal in Santa Barbara. They still recognize it every single year. But in no way was I affected by it. And me and my friends, that night we were actually just hanging out in the little apartment that we had. And, just like everybody else, we were planning on going out that night. I want to say it was probably a weekend. And I know we had plans to go out to the movies. We were going to watch like an X-Men movie or something stupid. And I just remember, it was probably like 8:00 or something like that. And we just started to see, police officers go by, which wasn't out of the ordinary in Santa Barbara because you would hear, especially on weekends, because it's a heavy party school, big party school, you would hear ambulances and police vehicles all the time. Every weekend, someone got over drunk, passed out, or hurt themselves at a party, or something bad would happen, and you would hear, police go by all the time. So it wasn't super out of the ordinary until, it was one police officer, then another, then another, then another, then another, and they just kept coming. Then fire trucks and ambulance, and, I don't even know how many went by. And that's when we kind of knew it was weird. that something weird was going on. Um, and interesting enough, and I remember talking about this in law school actually, um, in a law school class, because we were talking about, like, I was in a higher education law class, and we were talking about things like mass shootings and what's the responsibility of universities and all that. But one of the interesting things is we did not become aware of what was going on through the university until like the next morning. They put out a notice that there's an active shooter or whatever. We found out actually first from friends. Initially, friends were texting that, there's a gang shooting. Two gangs are fighting each other, and so everybody thought it was some sort of gang shooting, which is weird because it's Isla Vista, and if you know that area, it's just complete kind of school area. It's a little town attached right to the university. So people were saying it was a gang shooting. And then slowly information started to trickle in through text message that it was an individual who was, engaging in an active shooting and a mass shooting, was shooting some people, and that firearms were involved. And then I remember we were watching the news as well, the local news, trying to get some information, and some information was kind of trickling in through the news. But I would say actually the students found out first who the individual was and what was really going on, because I would say within, an hour of everything really starting to take off is when this individual who went around shooting people, he had made a YouTube video the day before saying that he was going to do this. And then all of a sudden through YouTube, the video started to get spread around to all of us, and we would all see the shooting. And we're like, oh, that's got to be what's going on. This has got to be the guy. And, we started to have reports from friends who were closer to the area of the shooting saying, yeah, there's definitely a shooting going on. And the individual ended up crashing in his vehicle on the main road, Del Playa, which is like the main party street, right? Runs parallel to the ocean where all the fraternities and party houses are. So he ended up going down that road, I guess, trying to hurt more people. Ended up, I think he got shot and crashed and then shot himself, which it's ridiculous that these people always engage in these shootings and they take the coward's way out. I wish he would have definitely got what he deserved, but at least he's not on this planet anymore. But beyond the point, yeah, so that's kind of the situation that happened, and that's, how I got involved in it. And like I said, I just dug deep and heavy into the firearms world and the YouTube world, got introduced to both firearms and YouTube at the same time. And that's also the reason of how I got into firearms, is one of the reasons why I decided also to start my own YouTube channel, is because I educated myself through YouTube. A lot of people say, YouTube is dumb, but there's a lot of very, very, very good education and as well as entertainment on YouTube. And I educated myself initially through YouTube. Now, YouTube is not the end all be all. Like I tell you guys a lot in my videos, go double check the stuff I say or other people say, check the sources for yourself. Go beyond what just the videos say, because even with my videos, I can't include everything that I want to talk about in the videos because I have to make them short, digestible, entertaining to you guys, in a way that brings you value. But sometimes, I do recommend you guys go beyond that, look up the sources for yourself, read the court cases for yourself, because there's a lot more information on those resources than I can put in a video. But that doesn't mean that YouTube is not valuable. And I knew when I started my YouTube channel that I wanted to educate people however I could through using YouTube. So that was part of the decision of why I started to do YouTube. But that's kind of a little bit down the road. So that kind of undergrad is how I got into firearms. Now from there, really what happened is I got more into the firearms world. My dad, because of me being interested into firearms, he got more into firearms as well. You would go shooting more together, just do a lot more of those traditional father-son things. So as I got more into firearms, he got more into firearms. Along this time period as well, I got more into prepping. And this was kind of that time period as well that, a lot of those survival videos and TV shows were very prevalent. The doomsday prepper and all that stuff. So I got heavy into firearms, heavy into prepping. But all during this time period, undergrad, right after undergrad, prepping for LSATs. The whole goal was to go to law school and to become an attorney. That was my goal. It's a goal I had for a very long time. And then I took the LSATs, did all that stuff, and then I got into law school, and I went to Penn State Law University Park. So I moved from California to Pennsylvania, and to kind of show you the difference of thought that happened really quick, from undergrad to law school, this is short 2 year period. I specifically remember when I was deciding whether or not I wanted to move to Pennsylvania and go to Penn State for law school. I remember looking at what the gun laws were like in Pennsylvania. Because, like I said, during this period, I educated myself. I learned all about California gun laws, what I could do, what I couldn't do, and I just realized that I was living in one of the worst states ever for gun rights. And so I wanted to get away from that. And so I remember when I was looking at and trying to decide, where I was going to move, where I was going to live, go to law school, because I knew I wanted to go out of state. I remember looking at Pennsylvania and seeing, their gun laws are a lot better than California's. Not perfect, but we're a lot better. And I would have a lot more options available to me. So I did decide to go to Penn State. Now, one of the caveats I want to say right here, because I do get asked this question a lot. I get asked a lot from people who tell me, hey, I want to go to law school. What do you recommend? Or I want to be a Second Amendment attorney like you, or I want to be a firearms attorney, or I want to be in the firearms industry just like you. What would you recommend to me? And my recommendation to people would be, do not go to law school unless you really know that's what you want to do. I saw plenty of people who were in my classes who went to law school because they couldn't think of what else they wanted to do with their life. And I think if that's your reason for going to law school, just because, being an attorney is a good job, it's a profession, it's a respectable profession. I think if that's your rationale for going to law school, you're going to hate it. And there were plenty of people who dropped out really early in the first year because they hated it. And even me, who knew the whole time, going through high school, undergrad, I knew I wanted to go to law school and become an attorney. Even me, I hated law school. I hated law school because it is not like undergrad. I think a lot of people have misconceptions. Law school is kind of like a job. It is stressful. There is a lot of anxiety attached to it because you're constantly being compared to the other people in your classes. There's ranking, super stressful. The classes aren't like you can just go and zone out like in undergrad. Now, this could be a little bit different because it's not like I went to a horrible law school. It's not like I went to an amazing law school, but I did still go to a top 100 ranked law school. And they do what's called the Socratic Method. So, you go to class and you get called on, and it's pretty much your show for the class, and you're going to get grilled for the next, 30 minutes to an hour by this professor who's been teaching this course, and whatever case you're called on, he's been teaching that for the last 20 years, and he knows all the ins and outs and arguments. He's heard every single, kid analyze it in every which way, and he's read all the various papers that have been written on this specific case, and he's just going to grill you and make you look like a fool, or she's going to grill you and make you look like a fool for the next 30 to an hour of class in front of all your friends. You get over it a little bit. By the time you're in your third year, you're just completely over it. It's whatever. But especially for that first year and for those first few months, it is stressful. But I loved law school. I would never go back to law school. If you couldn't pay me to go back to law school. Actually, that's not true. I mean, I'm sure you could pay me to go back to law school. I'm sure there's a certain amount of money that someone would say, yeah, I would pay you X amount to go back to law school. And I would, because again, it's not that hard. It's school. So I'm not saying that it's like the hardest thing I've ever done in my life, but it was stressful. I would much rather go back to undergrad because undergrad was so much more fun. But yeah, so in law school, still was into firearms. The one regret I have now is I didn't join any of the clubs really that involved Second Amendment advocacy. There were some kind of clubs that got started by some people now who've reached out after the fact. who've seen what I do now and what I do on YouTube and are like, man, why did you not join the club? And it's because I'm very much an introverted person, even all throughout law school. One of the saving graces was that I had my wife with me. She wasn't my wife at the time, but she did follow me from California to Pennsylvania, lived with me for the 3 years over there in Pennsylvania. And she she gets me out of my shell. So that was one of the really good things because I wouldn't even probably had any friends in law school if it wasn't for her, because she's the one who became friends with all the people in law school, and through kind of proxy, all of a sudden I became friends with them, and we're still really good friends. And I'm going to be going down to one of their weddings here really soon in San Diego, and hang out with all of them again. So we're all still really good friends. But yeah, through law school, still very much interested in firearms, in Second Amendment law. But when it comes to law school, and I've talked about this on a few different videos, you do required courses your first year. One of those required courses is constitutional law, and you cover all of the main cases that the Supreme Court has covered pretty much when it comes to constitutional law. And you do, at least for me, I did have a section on Second Amendment law, but that only included about half of a day, and it only included really 3 cases. You know, it covered Heller, McDonald, and Miller. That was it. And the professor just asked some quick questions, and 30 minutes in, that was it. You were done with it. And he would say, I think he just said, that's all we really have on it. The Supreme Court has refused to take any other cases because it's, such a political question. And then we moved on from whatever it was. But I remember when I was reading the con law book, I was super interested in Heller. I had already read Heller and McDonald and all those by that time, but I was stoked for that class. And when we got there, that class, I was hoping I would get called on. I raised my hand to be called on, didn't get called on, which I was sad about. Someone else got called on. But then I was a little bit depressed because we didn't really get to have a whole lot of discussion about firearms and the Second Amendment and the rights and what the framers intended when they protected our right to keep and bear arms in the Second Amendment. So I was a little bummed out about that. And really, I think at that point, it made it very clear to me that the Second Amendment's treatment, especially in the legal world, it really is like a second-class right, like Clarence Thomas has said. When it comes to law schools, when it comes to how other attorneys treat it, it really is treated like a second-class right, which it is not. It is a fundamental right. It is your right to defend yourself or other individuals, and it is also your right to defend yourself and other individuals from a tyrannical government. Now, at this time, I did not think at all that I would practice Second Amendment law. So this is also one of those really interesting things. People reach out to me all the time and say, I want to practice Second Amendment law. How do I go about doing that? And the reality is, and it's very sad to say, there is not very many opportunities out there for you. I just got really lucky, and I'm really blessed to have been put in the position that I am now. But that's really because I took the initiative, because I was passionate about this topic. I was passionate about firearms, and I did something on my spare time. But in no way during law school did I think, I'm going to leave law school and practice, firearms law and be a Second Amendment advocate. In no way did I think that. The only real Second Amendment attorney that I knew of during the time, and I guess he's not really a Second Amendment attorney, he's an attorney who had a YouTube channel and talked about, firearms and gun rights. And that's not a knock on him by any means, because I'm a huge fan of him, but that's Colion Noir. And during this time when I was in law school, I watched a lot of Colion Noir, of course, because I was interested in what he was talking about. And that was also the period of time when he was with the NRA. And we did all those NRA shows. He did the Noir series, which I loved, very high production value. I really enjoyed watching those, but that's the only individual I knew. So coming out of law school, I did know some people who liked guns, and a lot of people knew me in some aspect in law school that I liked guns and that I was a gun guy. And I got to experience a lot more freedoms for sure when I was in Pennsylvania. I mean, there was more ammunition in the Walmart than I've ever seen at any gun store in California. That's how drastic of a difference it is from California to any other state. And some of my biggest regrets, which a lot of you guys in California know, is that I did not purchase more firearms when I was in Pennsylvania, um, so that I could have them transferred over here into California when I left Pennsylvania. Primarily, that was because I really didn't intend to come back to California. Um, I had planned to do some other things, but I ended up coming back to California mainly because my father's health was a little bit iffy when I was in law school. We had been away from family for 3 years, and my wife and I decided that, we were going to come back to California, be with our family. And then I was presented a job opportunity in my hometown to work with a local firm, which I did end up taking. Um, so that's kind of the law school route. Still was heavily involved and interested into firearms, but by no means did I ever think or ever plan that it would end up like how it is now. So now this kind of takes me into the more interesting part of this story that I think a lot of you guys would be more interested in. It's, how did I start the YouTube channel and how did I end up to where I am now, to where I have the YouTube channel, have some sort of following, I guess. People actually interested in what I have to say. I'm still baffled by that. I don't know why anybody would be interested in what I have to say, but I've built a following on YouTube and I get a lot of amazing opportunities. And how did I end up where I am? So really was just dumb luck. I don't really know how to say it any better, or just the grace of God. But like I said, I moved back to California, took the California bar, passed it the first time, which if you know, that's a huge deal, because the California bar is the hardest bar in the nation to pass. Its pass rate is super low, especially for first timers, and then gets even worse as you go. For retakers, it gets worse and worse. So passed it the first time, joined a local firm in my hometown, um, which was an awesome opportunity. It was an amazing firm, and my decision when I decided to leave them had nothing to do with my criticism of the firm or anything. I loved working with the people there. They were very passionate about what they did, and it was an amazing firm. And a little bit of a discussion later is when they did find out about that I had a YouTube channel, they were all for it, which I think is a little bit unheard of. And to their credit, specifically to one of the partners' credit, when he found out about it, he was like my biggest advocate for like, yes, you have to pursue this, because he understood the value of what I was doing and what it meant. So yeah, I joined that firm and I worked for them for say like it was like 2, almost 3 years. And during this time, my wife and I were married at this point, and she started to work with a company, and the company required her to have to go travel around. And a lot of times she would have to travel out of state. So she would be gone for sometimes a week, 2 weeks at a time. So that would mean, I would go to work all day, come home, and just be by myself, watch Netflix, watch YouTube, a lot of gun content, go to bed, rinse and repeat. Um, and eventually, just what happened is, I ran through all the Netflix shows I would want to watch. I was bored, by myself. And there was really one main catalyst. I was always interested in YouTube. I was really interested in like the gun tuber guys. Like I said, I was a big fan of a lot of these guys, just like probably a lot of you guys are fans of me and other people, or followers of me and other people. So I was always interested in kind of the gun community world. But really, the main catalyst for it was one YouTuber's video. And it was a YouTuber, I've already mentioned him. His name was Jonathan from Tactical Toolbox. And he made a video series actually about being a gun tuber and how do you become a gun tuber? What is it like to be a gun tuber? How do you start a YouTube channel? Um, and for whatever reason, I watched that and I was like, man, that doesn't seem too hard. I really like gun content. I think I have an interesting perspective to add to people, to add to the gun community world. And it wasn't me being like, oh, I have something of value. It just was, one, I was super bored. I'm a nerd, and I get focused on something, and then I just have to learn all about it. And for whatever reason, when I watched that video, it captivated me, and I wanted to learn about what it is to be a YouTuber. I wanted to learn everything. I wanted to learn how to do it. Um, Definitely didn't think it would ever end up anywhere where it is now. But I decided, you know what? I'm going to try it. He made it sound pretty simple, and the big advice that, he gave me through that video and that I give a lot of people now as well. And you hear kind of said all the time when people ask, I want to make a YouTube channel. What would you say to me? And my answer to those people is just do it. Your first videos are going to be horrible. You're not going to know what you're going to be doing. You don't know at all what you're doing. You're going to stumble all over yourself. Your editing is going to be horrible. Your thumbnails are going to be horrible, and you're going to get probably 0 views. But just do it. You're talking about stuff just doesn't ever lead to anything. At some point, you got to take the leap, and that doesn't mean you go and buy, thousands of dollars worth of gear. The setups that I have now, I didn't buy till a few months ago. When I first started, I just had a camera that was my wife's. It was an older camera. It was like a Canon Rebel T5, but it didn't even have a flip out screen. I had to run a wire into my laptop to use it as my display screen. And my camera was propped up on the stove, and I was in the kitchen of our apartment. Horrible, like, acoustics. The visual was horrible. My presentation was horrible. My presentation, all that stuff's so horrible now, but it's better than what it was then. But yeah, that's just kind of how I got started. And I knew I'd want to talk about gun laws and guns, but I didn't really have a plan. I thought maybe I would do some gun reviews, and I've never really done that, mainly because I don't think that's the value I have to add to people. But yeah, just got started and never really thought it would lead to anything. And, I just did it while my wife was traveling because I was bored. And I had a couple of videos that took off. I was really fortunate. I had a couple of videos that took off maybe a few months in. Weren't anything crazy, maybe 20,000 views, which is still really good when you're only like 3 months in. But I remember, I think I started in July of 2019. And come December of 2019, I didn't film a single video December 2019. And I had pretty much decided that I was going to quit it. Wasn't going to do YouTube anymore. Mainly because just my wife was not traveling anymore. Work was busy. And it wasn't anything about like the analytics or anything like that. But, it wasn't like I had blown up yet. So I didn't make a single video at all in December. And then, New Year's rolls around. And I remember one of my resolutions was like, I'm going to start the YouTube channel again. I'm not going to quit just yet. So I started it up again in January, and it started to gain a little traction. I do know that in January of 2020, I had like 5,000 subscribers come end of January, which is really good considering I'd only been doing it for, 4 months ish. And then kind of the rest is history, continue to make videos, slowly continue to grow. A lot of you guys saw value in what I was talking about on my channel. And it just continued to grow and grow. And especially one of the things too is, with 2020, the way that things were in America and our society, firearms and firearms ownership was definitely thrust into the forefront because there were so many new gun owners out there in California and just beyond. So yeah, the channel grew. Definitely didn't think it would end up anywhere near what it is now. Kind of go back to, I said I was working still at this firm. Eventually, it got big enough to where people were starting to find out because I didn't tell anybody. The only person, my wife didn't even know the first maybe month I was doing it because she was traveling and I just, would do it when she wasn't there. So my wife the first month didn't even know. Of course, eventually I told her and she found out. And my dad knew from day one, was always super supportive. And so those were really the only people I told. Didn't tell my in-laws, who my mother-in-law is probably one of my biggest supporters now. But didn't tell any of them, didn't tell my sister, didn't tell my work, which was really risky not telling my work. And my thought process is it didn't really matter because I wasn't very big. But then it started to get big and I didn't know how to tell them. I think at the point of where, one of the partners found out about it because it just showed up randomly on his YouTube feed when he was watching something. I would say probably around then I was maybe at like 60,000 subscribers. And he just comes into my office one morning. He's like, "Hey, so when were you going to tell me that you have a YouTube channel?" And I was just like, I was probably like pale white. I think we talked about, I was just like pale white. And I thought, I was like, oh, I'm getting fired today. But he was like, "Yeah, it's really cool. Like, we need to talk about that. I think we can, do some stuff with it." And, um, found out a way to, to help you do this. And so they were really cool about it. And like I said, they were really cool about the YouTube channel. Um, but yeah, so, 2020 went on, and, you know, my dad passed away in 2020 because of all the COVID stuff. And in November 2020 is when I officially joined Firearms Policy Coalition. And that was purely because of the YouTube channel. They became aware of me because of the YouTube channel, and I was blessed enough to join them and join their legal team. And so that's also can show you guys just how one powerful YouTube is if you are interested in doing YouTube yourself. But also just like completely, I say I'm just lucky and blessed, just how lucky I am, because it's very unconventional what I've gotten to do through YouTube and the opportunities I've had because of YouTube. And since then, it's just continued to take off. In January, I got to go to the Gundies. I got to go out to Texas because I was nominated in one of the categories and was in the top 4 for one of the categories for most influential male of the year, which was really awesome. And I got to go, to Texas, and I got to meet a lot of these gun guys, these gun tubers that I had followed for a really long time. And I got to be kind of the fanboy, and I got to like super geeked out. I met Jared from Guns and Gadgets, super good guy. We're good friends now, and we text back and forth, but got to meet Jared. And I remember I was like all anxious when I saw him in the parking lot when me and my wife first pulled up. Super cool guy, but I got to meet people like Chris from Honest Outlaw, the guys from Pew Pew View. And then I got to meet a lot of other guys like Mike from Mr. Guns and Gear. And then the one that was really big to me that I thought was really cool is I got to meet Jonathan from Tactical Toolbox there at the Gundies. And I got to tell him like, "Hey, like, I'm here." Even at this time, I wasn't big. I probably only had like, maybe 60,000 subscribers, something like that. But I got to tell him like, "Hey, I am here because of you, because of that video you put out." And he was a really nice guy. I've talked to him a little bit, through text here and there, but it was just really cool to like say, "Hey, your video influenced me. I'm making videos now, and I get to bring education to people. And it's because you decided to put out that video." And that's kind of been the whole goal with the channel is, I got into the firearms, community, 2A advocacy through YouTube. And I just want to bring that back to people, bring education back to people, to educate people and to get people interested in this community, in the Second Amendment, so we can have more people join this community and advocate for it and advocate for our rights. So that's been the whole goal with it. And yeah, since then, 2021, we're still in 2021. It's continued to grow. We've reached over 100,000 subscribers this year, which was absolutely insane. Never would have thought ever that I would reach 100,000 subscribers. It's one of those kind of goals you have. Once you kind of get some traction, you're like, well, maybe I'll reach 100,000. And you kind of put it up on that pedestal, but you reach it and you realize, it wasn't that big of a deal. I don't know why I put so much emphasis on it. But yeah, I think in May of this year, I reached 100,000, and, we just are continuing to grow. We're, about 170,000 plus right now. And hopefully we'll reach 200,000 by the end of the year. That's kind of been one of the back of my mind goals. But more than anything, it's just been it's been amazing just be building community, getting to engage with people, get to talk about things I'm passionate about, things that I never thought people would be even interested in listening and learning about, like case laws, and listen to some boring guy talk about laws and cases. But it's been really amazing. You guys have really shown me a lot of support, and I cannot thank you enough for that. And I've gotten to do really cool things like do the Armed to May event back in May, and go down to San Bernardino and meet 3,000 people who came to that event, who were coming to meet me and Reno May, and get to shake hands and talk to a lot of you guys. It's just been absolutely amazing. Like I said, it's a lot of people ask me, how can I do what you're doing? And I think anybody can do what I do, but a lot of it is just, I think, of just being lucky and being blessed and um, just being super fortunate. And it's a weird world. I tell my wife all the time, I think we just have been thrown into, some sort of alternate reality where this is my life. And I think a lot of you guys who met me when I went to the Armed May event, if you talk to me, I kept saying like, what is my life like? That was something I just kept repeating to people is like, what is my life? It's been a really big blessing. So I cannot thank you guys enough for all of your support. For those of you guys who support me so much that you would want to listen to a longer form discussion like this. A lot of you guys asked for me to do a podcast. So this is just kind of the inaugural podcast. And I thought I would just kind of take you guys through my journey. And the overall goal is just to give you an idea, a little bit more of who I am, where I came from, how I got into this community, how I got into 2A advocacy, and also just to tell you guys how fortunate I am and how much I have to thank you guys for all the support you've shown me. So thank you guys for listening. I'm going to be hoping to do at least a podcast every single week. If you guys have any recommendations, DM me, drop in the comment sections of videos or however, you can email me any topics that you guys have in mind. I'm hoping to bring on some other guests as well. I know a lot of people talked about, Reno May. My hope is, to get Reno May on. A lot of other gun tubers as well, so we can just kind of have discussions and you guys can get to know us a little bit more. Thank you guys for supporting, and here's to having more podcasts, more episodes, and more discussions with you guys. And also, one thing I want to mention is that if you guys want to support what I'm doing here on the podcast, I guess the best thing for the analytics over here on podcast is for you guys to leave reviews. So leave reviews however you think was best supporting the channel. I really appreciate that. And so, as always, thank you all for watching, and never forget, this nation was built by armed scholars, and this nation will be maintained by armed scholars.